Test 1, 2, 3. Test 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Tarrant County Hospital District's Board of Managers meeting for February the 9th. So we will call our meeting to order, and we will follow our agenda, and we will open with a prayer and then followed by our pledge.
Good afternoon. Will you please pray with me? Loving God, in this Valentine's season of love, we ask today that you give us eyes to see the love that is all around us. And in this meeting, let us connect to the hope that inspires us, the mission that unifies us, and the collective commitment to doing good that makes us all who we are. We ask, loving God, that you be with us in this meeting today. Lead us, guide us, inspire us, inform us, and keep us focused on the patients and the communities who are counting on us to make a difference in their today and in all of their tomorrows. All this we ask in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Need a peppermint? You okay? All right. Okay. Do we have any citizens to address them? We have no one wishing to address the board. So next we will move into our public hearing. This is a public hearing of the Board of Managers of Tarrant County Hospital District to consider fiscal year 2023 providers participation program and other related matters. We will now open our public hearing regarding the Tarrant County Hospital District participation program to hear the public comments and consider actions. Consider actions concerning the amount of the mandatory providers participation payment that the board intend to require of all Tarrant County hospitals for fiscal year 2022, and how the revenue derived from their mandatory payments to be spent. Okay, so we're open. Our public hearing is open, and we have no one here to speak. So, since we have no one here, no citizen wishing to comment on this issue, we will now close our public hearing, okay? We will now consider approval of the resolution to set the mandatory provider participation payment for fiscal year 2023 and determine how the revenue from these payments is to be spent under the Tarrant County Providers Participation Program. The resolution is: Number one, we authorize the collection of the mandatory payment from each institutional healthcare provider located in the hospital district. Two, authorize the use of the fund collected through the mandatory payment for the purpose specified in Chapter 298B, Texas Health and Safety Code. And three, set the amount of the mandatory payment for the fiscal year ending in 2023 at 6% of the net patient revenue of the institutional healthcare providers located in the Tarrant County Hospital District geographic jurisdictional area. Okay, do anyone have any questions? There being no questions, do I have a motion on the resolution? Okay. All right, it was moved by DT, second by Amanda. Okay, are there any other questions? There being no questions, all those that's in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye. And those opposed by nay. Okay, motion passes. I will now entertain a motion to authorize the President and CEO of Tarrant County Hospital District to make an intergovernmental transfer from the local providers participation fund to the Texas Health and Human Service Commission based on the executive Commissioners of the Texas Health and Health Services Commissioner schedule request. Based on the Executive Commission of the Texas Health and Human Services Commission schedule of requested IGT for compensation care programs, okay? All right, moved by,
Second.
all right, all the way. There, all those in favor? If there are not any questions, I know, do I need to explain what this is before? Do you understand what this program is about, right? Okay, all right. Okay, those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed by nay. Okay, thank you. All right. Okay. And next, we will have the approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes? There being no correction, I'll entertain a motion for approval. All right. I know y'all are playing with your iPads, but I have a motion by Ralph, second by DT. Okay.
Sure suggestion.
I know, and I'm going to have to take these down. I'm going to take these toys.
I deliver.
All right. It's been motioned and second. All those that approve the minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed by nay. Okay. All right. I do not have a report. I do want to kind of follow up on something that the previous chair used to do. He used to say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I do want to thank all of the staff for all their work during the ice storm, and you continued the service, didn't miss a beat. So I want to say thank you for your efforts and all that you do, okay? That's the end of my report, and I knew you was going to say it, so I said it before.
She sure did. I took my full
Okay.
report. I'm going to ask, I'm putting Sharon on the spot, but Sharon, would you please come up and speak to the board about how we did with our recent bond rating, and then what the next steps are?
Yeah, so we're kind of in the final stretch for our bond issue. We're actually going to sell them next Thursday, and I'll be able to report to you exactly what interest rate we get on those. But last week, 2 weeks ago, Dr. Duncan, Bill, and I had met with 3 of the rating agencies. Last week, we got those results back. They were favorable. They've shown and were supportive of what all that we have been planning and working towards for the last 5 years. Fitch, which is new to JPS, gave us a AA. When we got our ratings back from Moody's, who had rated us in the past, the last rating from 2 years ago was a AA minus, effectively. They use a different rating scale than the others, but we were at a AA3, which is a AA minus. We got a 2-notch upgrade to a AA1 from Moody's. And then also new Kroll with a K, their bond rating came back at a AAA, which is the highest rating that you can receive. These are government supported general obligation debt. So these firms use different criteria and weightings to different areas of revenue. So this is a split rating, but they're all very high investment grade ratings. So we are extremely pleased to report that to you today.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Great job, okay?
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Sharon, the Fitch and Kroll are new. How did we change from, I guess we haven't sold bonds in forever, so maybe that's why.
So the rating agencies, historically, there's 4 out in the market that are well-known, which also includes Standard & Poor's, and the 3 that rated us. Based on our financial advisors from Hilltop and Estrada Hinojosa, They recommended that we drop S&P and we move to the two newer bond rating agencies. But S&P and Moody's I met with on an annual basis. So even though we were not issuing bonds, we will have continual updates. Now, with this bond issue, it has been forever since we've come to the market, and it's a very large issue in any sense. Even if we would have been coming to the market, sure, this $450 million is big on the radar. And because it is a general obligation or a GO bond, they recommended that we move to Fitch as well as Kroll, and also kept one of the two current.
Okay.
So we just really went with their advisement.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Other updates, as Dorothy said, we really do want to thank the staff. Truly appreciate their hard work and their commitment during the winter storm. This room was actually set up for night sleeping, and our cafeteria was busy supplying meals for those who were here at the hospital. It was probably about a 3-day event before we returned to normal operations, but just really the quick work by the team, the lift of the emergency management team, and just the smoothness on how it's run is pretty impressive. And so I do want to thank the entire staff who were here during that time. I do want to introduce Dr. Alawi. Nadia, you want to come up? Many of you probably have seen Nadia. Dr. Alawi. You've been with JPS now for how long, Doctor? 6? Okay, so we came in around the same time then. Good people came in 6 years ago. Put a little notch for the 6 years. Is that you too?
You're in that range, Janet. You're in that range.
Years ago. Great things happen. With the departure of Dr. Becker as president of Acclaimed, Dr. Alawi has been the silent number 2 that's always worked very hard, both out in the community clinics but also at Acclaim. And so she has agreed to step in as interim president over Acclaim. Dr. Alawi, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and I want to thank you for stepping in and doing what you do best.
Thank you. I'm Nadia Alawi. There's also a hyphen, Kakamanolis. It makes my name very long and difficult for patients to pronounce, so I typically stop at Alawi. Internal medicine, primary care by trade. I still see patients on a regular basis. I actually had clinic this morning, and so was very busy with our patients this morning before I got here today. I am married, originally from New York, and I have 3 children who keep me very busy and on my toes because all of them are doing something and none of them can drive yet. And so we are constantly going somewhere and doing something for them. But my passion has always been this population, these patients. Even before I was here, I was taking care of patients like this in New York. I was taking care of the patients who don't necessarily have a voice. And so I'm really here just to keep stability, hopefully, during this time of transition, and then we'll kind of see what happens from there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with that, Madam Chair, that is all the update I have.
All right, thank you. Then we will move into report from the medical staff. Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of really quick updates for you. Those of you who were here last year will recall that I promised you we'd finish the delineation of privilege project by first quarter 2023. It's February, so the timeline is ticking. We have 8 DOPs remaining out of 65. that we promised to review over that period of project timeline. So we are very nearly done. The MEC will complete this project by the end of March. You will not see all of them come through until April and May because, as I told you before, there's a 1 to 2 month delay to get them into your packets. But we will have done a complete revision of all our delineation of privileges, and we're going to meet our target. So I'm really excited about that. 65 is a tremendous body of work. It took all of the chairs, vice chairs, division chiefs, departments, the medical staff office, the credentialing committee was all involved in this project. So these have gone through a large number of hands and reviews. So when you do see them in your packet, you can feel assured that a lot of people have looked at them. The other thing I wanted to share with you is that the medical staff office has developed a dashboard for credentialing, and we are driving to specific key performance indicators. And I just want to share a couple of them with you because we have, over the last year, really done some great work there as well. The average day that it takes us to move an application through, so that would be an initial application from receipt to approval by MEC, started out last year at 79 days. So if Dr. Simmons wanted to come and practice at JPS and put an application in, it might take 79 days on average for him to get his approval at MEC. We have reduced that to 57 days on average. That's a 28% improvement in the process time for applications. That's pretty remarkable when you stop and think of the number of applications we process on any given month. And it has resulted in the fact that I've had to call on Dr. Duncan only twice for temporary privileges in all of 2022, which I don't like to have to call Dr. Duncan for privileges because she always has about 50 questions for me. So I'm totally fine with just doing it twice. And so that is really great performance. And the other metric that we're tracking that's pretty impressive is when you go to reapply for your privileges, obviously, like for example, my privileges expire in July 1. If I don't get my packet to the board by July 1, I can't practice here, so I lose my privileges. It's a very big deal for a doctor not to be able to work. We were really squeezing up against those deadlines prior to 2022, and so we set a benchmark that we would have reapplication packets completed to the board for approval with 1 month to spare. So 1 month before your privileges expire, they're going to be at the board. So in case you all have an issue or there's an unexpected issue, it gives us another month to resolve it before the practitioner would lose their privileges. It was 0% when we started last year. None of them were coming here a month before, and we are at 100% now.
Wow.
So it's really fantastic work being done, and I have to give a lion's share of credit to the medical staff office. That's just the good news. The next piece is the red folder is your credential file for the month. These are the applications and reapplications that are moving forward to the board for approval. I have nothing to discuss in closed session or to bring forward, no concerns. And so I do submit those to you for approval.
All right. Okay. Okay, so you submitted those for approval. Can I get a, well, okay, Steve, all right. Are there any questions? All right, there being no further question, all those approve of the privileges signify by saying aye. Aye. Those that disapprove by nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Dr. Miles, and that was a great job in getting all that done. Thank you. Okay. All right. Next, we will have report from our committees. We had a joint planning, finance, and a planning committee. So we'll start with you, DT, and then Trent will do for planning. Okay.
Mine's going to be a short report. Okay. We met on January 26th, and that concludes our report. No, I'm just kidding. Our financial, we reviewed the financial for November and December at that last meeting, and then also the December year to date was reported. JPS through first quarter is $6.6 million ahead of the operating budget, which is at $33.2 million. Most of this is due to strong inpatient volume, recognition of the HARP supplementary funding program, which is approved after our budget was established, and then the salary were higher than budgeted, but it is supported by the increased staffing and the high volumes of the hospital. The other one to report is the acclaimed physician group, ended the first quarter with a minus 8.8 million, which is 3.2 million better than we budgeted for. The new physician comp plan has increased productivity and revenue. Also, plan was budgeted to roll out on October 1st, but we delayed it by 1 month. On the consent agenda, we're going to ask for, there will be 9 contracts on our consent agenda, and it's in here today. So with this, I would like to thank the financial team, I guess our operation and everybody else for a great job with the bond rating and everything else. So, and on the consent agenda, I'm going to, on items C and D, I'm abstaining from that one. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Let's conclude our report, Trent. So.
Any questions of DT? All right. Trent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Several things on planning. I think most of you were there, but our Arlington strategy was discussed, as well as our current status for our RFPs and architectural renderings. Those of you that were there realized that the recommendation from the board was to continue with the existing strategy for the Arlington projects and keeping with our master facility plan and not to amend that at this point in time. The staff was asked by the committee to continue looking for strategies that help us educate the Arlington community on JPS availability and JPS access, and staff certainly will be doing that. Our psychiatric emergence center now is under construction. When you come in the parking lot, you can see a lot of work going on to your left there. We saw a rendering of that project, so great to see dirt moving on that. We also talked about our medical office building status and where we are on that. There was 2 different options given for that project, one with a 6-story and an unfinished 7th floor, and one with a 7th floor build out. And we also talked about the P3 components. The committee recommendation is that we go ahead and finish out the 7-story medical office building. There was not a substantial savings between holding off on that 7th floor. In fact, it would probably cost us a great deal more later, and based on our current volume, it just didn't make sense to stop at 6 floors. So the recommendation is to go ahead with the 7th floor build out. There is no P3 component on that particular aspect of the project. The committee had talked about this at length for multiple years. As a matter of fact, this P3 option has been on the table. The bottom line, and a lot of time was spent on this, the bottom line is the finances relative to the P3 solution, and our current capital position simply didn't warrant the P3 solution. So JPS is not in a difficult place right now when it comes to capital. It didn't make sense to go out and spend more money on operations than we needed to spend to be able to get this facility built in a traditional way. So that will be a non-P3 component. We did talk about the first floor retail. Those of you who remember the MOB. MOB is designed to have 7 floors, but the first floor has always been contemplated to be a retail mixed-use component. That will still move forward. More than likely, we will be looking at options where there could be a P3 component in that, including potentially looking for firms that might be able to run that and lease that out from us so that JPS doesn't move into the retail business, which makes a lot of sense. So we're keeping that option open on the MOB. We also talked about the central utility plant. We recommended pursuing, and this is not new information, we've always looked at a cogen plant, but we looked at the specifics of the cogen plant with reciprocating engines and heat water recovery. That's as recommended by staff. Other items, we looked at the RFQ, approved the RFQ for the MOB. The design of the garage is currently underway, and for all of you that drive into our garage, I know you appreciate the fact that the design of the garage is now underway. I know our visitors and our patients certainly appreciate it. And we also released the RFQ for the North Pavilion expansion. You can see a lot of work going on over there at the moment too. And finally, we are moving forward with engineering and design for the central utility plant, and that recommendation is to Jacobs Engineering. Jacobs was one of the very rare rare submittals that actually scored a perfect score on the proposal. So that was a pretty unanimous decision recommendation. So, Madam Chair, that concludes planning. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Trent. Appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay? And you appreciate your report, DT.
Thank you.
Interested in looking at details of our committee. That's what Lanny told me to say.
All right, next on our agenda is our proposed changes to our bylaws, and I know you've had an opportunity to review them. We sent them back out, and Daphne has sent out the changes, but you want to go through those for me?
Sure. We included an executive summary last time, and there is an updated executive summary in front of you all, and so I won't go through the ones that were already there for your review last time unless you'd like for me to address any of those. But if you'll turn to the second page on the red, just to, we had allowed everyone an opportunity to review those and let me know if they had any questions or comments. We did receive some good feedback from our two new board members that also had a chance to review those. Most of these are clarifications and some changes to language to make clear what the intent was. So in section 2.6.2, which deals with the board's ability to set a policy requiring more than a majority vote, we added language that clarifies that any resolution or policy that is proposed by the board that would require approval of any matter by more than a majority of the voting members present would require the same number of members to approve that proposed resolution or policy. In section 3.1, we added language that clarifies that the term of office begins in January of each of the applicable years that an officer is coming into the role. I'm going to skip section 3.3 and 3.4 for just a second, because I need clarification on that from what the board intended there. Section 6.1, we just deleted language that had included any present before the words members and officers to clarify that insurance that's purchased, any of our D&O insurance that's purchased may exist for prior acts that include past members or officers. So those were all clarifications. Section 3.3 and 3.4, as you recall, there's language that currently exists in the bylaws that allows for each member that's holding an officer position to automatically take the seat of the higher officer that's vacating the position. There's language in there that a member can, unless a member opposes that and wishes to submit it to a vote, and the language is a little bit unclear as to whether that will require a majority of the entire board to approve that motion, or if it's just a majority of the members present. I've had some discussion with our board chair about it. I think we think that it was intended to be a majority of the entire board, but I needed clarification so that we can clean that language up, because it is a substantive change if we make that.
Yeah, I feel that it should be a majority of the entire board.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Anybody else have any discussion on it?
Yeah, I have first, Daphne, I'm not sure that the second round of changes you discussed are in the board packet or on the iPad. So
there's a separate document at your seat, and I just put it in the executive summary. I did not print the entire bylaws for you again.
All right,
Do you have that there? I can bring it around if you can't find yours.
It's at your
Page of the executive summary.
Here, Lonnie, you can hand him one.
You got one over there for me. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and I have some concerns about the changes to the committee structure, and I'd like to get maybe a discussion, a good, healthy discussion to hear everyone's views. But I'm concerned about removing our physicians from any of our committees unless there's a compelling reason to do so. JPS relies heavily, obviously, on our physicians, not just for the daily operations of the hospital, but also for the vision for the future of JPS. And as we face the challenges of the future, our physicians are we're going to rely on them to help us meet those challenges, not just operational, but financial. And they have the vision. And also, some of your doctors on staff here have the proven ability to execute. It's one thing to have a vision, it's another thing to execute that vision. And the JPS of 10 years from now will probably be very different than what we have today. And a big team that's going to get us to that point is going to be our doctors. And so I'm concerned about the optics, but also the impact of removing their knowledge and wisdom from any of our committees. The one exception being the nominating committee. I feel like we should pick our own officers. But governance, which deals with coding, billing, maybe HIPAA, other types of compliance issues, that's an essential function to have physician representation on. And HR issues, whether it's benefits or HR policy, I think that we need our physicians' wisdom on that committee also, not just for what they can add to it, but it sends a message to our medical staff that they are valued and that we want them at every table, including in closed session, unless, again, there's a compelling reason that they shouldn't be on these committees. And I do want to hear Dr. Miles' thoughts, but other than that, I'm going to remain silent. I want to use my ears and hear what your thoughts are about these proposed changes to the committees.
Let me start off by saying that as looking at the committees and making sure that the time was best spent for board members, I looked at combining committees. I also looked at when you're on those committees, where the decisions and the input is made. When stuff get to this board, it has usually been vetted by an operational committee, a project group that is looking at that. I believe that that is where your doctors, nurses, and all are being a part of that, developing what they are bringing here. That is your hospital, and whatever, if you have some in the CHCs, if they're working on a project, that would be where their biggest impact would be made. That was one of my concerns on that. Other things is looking at, if I'm looking at cutting back on the board's time, I'm looking at, do we need to tie up some physicians' time too? And they are will already be working, if we are doing a project, they're looking at policies. That has been reviewed by doctors long before it get to us. That is how I looked at that. That was my thoughts on it. So I wanted to be clear. And one of the deals, as we were changing this, I wanted us to have subcommittees where we could pull together smaller groups to work on a project. Now, this is not a committee that's going to go on forever, but to address that. At that point, you would have all of the folks that impact that project or that procedure working at that time, which to me, my thoughts is that give them more input into what is coming up and making sure that all of their concerns have been addressed. Okay, now I'll yield.
So let me jump in and respond. I've had many conversations over the last month related to the changes in the bylaws for the district, specifically related to the committee representation for the medical staff. And it is a consistent theme that I hear in every conversation that I have had, and that is the medical staff is extremely disappointed that we are going to be removed from the committees. Totally understand nominating, I agree with that, but we are very disappointed that we will no longer have representation on human resources or on the governance committee, because we feel like we have value that we can bring to that committee. We have contextual information that we can bring. We serve as the patient advocate for you. we are a measure of your connection to the patients, and we can advocate on our patients' behalf at that venue. We have long enjoyed a very collaborative governance structure with this board, and that is the structure that is best practices according to the Joint Commission. And we've long enjoyed a very close and productive relationship, and the optics around removing us from committees is really being viewed as a diminishment of our representation.
Anyone else?
Madam Chair, is it possible that we could, split the apple so that we're taking care of any specific confidentiality or privacy or legal concerns in a committee that would not have anybody but board members on it, but allow as broad a participation by our physicians on the rest of the committees as possible? Is there a middle ground that will achieve everyone's goals?
And can I just help with, just to clarify, for those of you who haven't looked at this freshly, the only two committees that, there was no physician participation on the nominating committee previously in the prior iteration of the bylaws. The HR committee and the governance committee, when you look at the duties of those committees, HR is probably 90% dealing with the executive compensation, the evaluation of the CEO, and it was more about, who are going to participate in those discussions, and we felt like there may still be an opportunity for, to get physician input where it's needed on that committee. So it's truly a board subcommittee, and that, I think that's where that proposal came from. Governance, there's a separate executive compliance committee where there is physician participation, and so I think Colin, as our chief compliance officer, felt that we're getting the input from the members of the clinical teams and the executive teams that actually rolls up to the governing board. So that was the thinking around the proposals, and I'm just putting that out there for the board to think through those issues.
Great, thank you.
Daphne, thank you for that clarification. I'm curious, though, the executive, I may have misheard you, the compliance committee where you said there's already physician representation, what physicians are we talking about? Did you just say that there was a compliance committee that already has physician
Executive
representation?
compliance committee.
What physicians
Yeah, I don't
are
have
on
the
that?
list of those, the committee members, but I do believe that there's physician representation on that committee.
Because that's outside the organized medical staff, that committee, so I'm not aware.
It
of
is.
who's
It's
participating.
led by the chief compliance officer.
How long have the physicians been on these committees? How long is this
That is a
going on?
great question, Steve. In speaking with Dr. Casey, who has the most historical knowledge, well, Dr. Haynes has huge historical knowledge too, we believe that we have sat on these committees going pretty much back to the post-Cicero era. I'm sorry if that's...
Sounds so regal.
I don't have a year, that's why I have to reference it that way, and that's before my time being here. So it's been it's been more than 10 years, certainly more than 10 years, possibly more than 15.
Yeah, that was probably around 2003 or 4.
Yeah, you
I
would have
guess.
better reference for that
Mr.
than
Cicero
me.
was CEO when I was a resident.
Okay.
Well, let me clarify something else. Up until Trent became the chair, all we had was Finance Committee, Quality, what was the other one, Trent? Planning. Planning was separate. Those were the three committees that we actually had. And under Trent's leadership, we brought forth the Governance Committee, with the HR, which I said, we started that out by it looking at compensation for the executive team. And I think we added another one. That's when we did the Medical Horizon. So when we started that's when we started those. And when we were looking at that, I can speak for the HR. I know why we started it, because we had no way of looking at the CEO. That was one of the key deals, the compensation. And so that was what it was created for. And I will say this, if we want to do and here's what I will offer, under the HR committee there are things that will not go to the general HR committee. That is board information, and that is compensation and the benefits and stuff like that. I'm just going to have to say it. I'm not trying to take anything away from any physicians. I think the physician will be even more so involved if we are looking at special issues. There is no group that's looking at, say, JPS Connection. That is a project that I want to bring forward, which will involve all departments. That is where I believe that we get the best use of the physicians. And I am definitely not trying to exclude them. I am trying to include them more. So when that decision is when they are talking about it, working on the policies that come up to us, which we are here just on looking at them to make sure they meet it strategically, that employees and stuff are treated fairly. Most of those decisions and all the input from doctors have been put in there. If I'm thinking about HR, as long as I was chair of that since it's been until Amanda took over, I do not believe that there was any, maybe I'm wrong, you got information, but there was not any input. We was looking at dashboards and stuff like that. But that was my position, is to utilize their time so that they would be involved in the processes, the procedures, the clinical practices that they are doing, that they are responsible. A lot of times when stuff get here, it's already a done deal. And if you haven't had your input in it, it's not going to be made here. So my deal was, let's make sure that they are in the ones where they're really developing it, looking at it, and coming up to us with their presentations. That was my thought.
Which committees in particular do the physicians feel is essential to have representation on?
Governance in particular. We understand the board's sensitivity around HR, and so that was not as high of a mark as the governance committee, but we really felt that we should remain on governance.
And that's the only one?
Well, the new bylaws have us remaining on finance planning, and we're remaining on quality and what's Horizons.
Medical Horizons.
Because Medical Horizons is going to quality, so we'll be on that, appropriately so. And then we would like to remain on governance. And some of it is optics, right? Some of it is the optics to the general medical staff. There are 4 pillars for physician engagement, and I'm probably speaking to the choir, but allow me to go through them. There are 4 pillars to physician engagement. The first one is transparency. The second is trust. The third is recognition, and the fourth is a seat at the table. And we fully recognize that the board is the governing body for JPS Health Network. The governing body has the responsibility, the authority. We get that, we accept that, but we would like a seat at the table.
Does the physician have a seat within a claim governing?
Well, that's a
Where
great
most of
question, DT. We're taking a right turn because the claim is not part of the organized medical staff. A claim is an independent physician group that's contracted to provide services to JPS Health Network, and they have their own structures and functions. But I'm representing to you as the president of the organized medical staff at JPS Hospital and Health Network. It's a bit confusing, I know. It gets cross-wired sometimes.
There's definitely providing input to a committee, but that is, as we all know, that's different than having a seat on the committee. So what exactly is the negative of not having
What is the
representation?
What is the negative?
I mean, or of having physician representation, if the staff feels that strongly about it, is there?
If they are feeling strong about governance, then I'm willing to look at governance. Since that's it, I'm not willing to on the HR because I don't see that, okay?
And that doesn't seem to be an issue, right? Okay.
That's really not the issue. We would obviously say that we would respect that opinion around HR as well, and we are not asking for that.
Okay, so it's only governance.
Governance, we'd like to be back on governance.
So the way it's currently is the way you want it to stay and not be changed, is that?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay.
I would like to know what's being missed by them not being on governance. What are they losing out on? What information are they not being privy to by not serving? Because that's kind of news to me.
Governance committee, based on what they're looking at, is monitoring that we are following our own policies. That is what that governance does, is they look at making sure that we are staying in compliance with our policies, whatever we are doing, all of those procedures are there. They have different ones that go through the hospital and look at stuff and come back and report it. So maybe it's the reporting mechanism because they are not involved in doing the surveys or stuff. They go through the department.
Yeah, as currently structured, to your point, it's mostly a report out for the chief compliance officer to bring forth those items that are hitting on some of the governing board's responsibilities. So, and if you read just kind of what that committee does, which again, Dr. Miles, to your point, there was no thought that this was going to be seen as not being transparent, because right now what they do is they review governance-related policies. They ensure that it ensures that the Board of Managers fulfills its responsibility related to internal audit, which is Chief Compliance Officer's purview, compliance and risk assessment programs, and provide functional oversight of that role. And so typically all of that work has been done. Colin is reporting out, and he does take the board, goes into closed session with the chief compliance officer for many of those reports. Bylaws can be one of the policies. One of the changes we made is that the board can make recommendations around the bylaws as well, so not just that committee.
Me that the term governance and the scope of what this committee has traditionally looked at may be at odds with one another. I mean, I completely understand Dr. Miles' point when it comes to the global governance component relative to the district's responsibility, and I think it's legitimate that the physicians have a large role in governance. It's a very different question if we're talking about compliance. And I'm not necessarily in favor of a separate compliance committee. So in my mind, having them continue to participate in governance, since it's relative to a larger goal than compliance, probably makes some sense.
So you'd be looking at changing the functions of the committee?
I would, but no, not really, because I think that's a little bit more work than's probably necessary.
Right.
I would say if physicians have a strong feeling about being on governance, especially because of their role of governance, I'm fine with that.
And that's based on because we've expanded the role of governance.
Yeah, because it's more than just compliance.
I mean, I know because I chaired it, then Roger chaired it, and that's why I guess why I'm raising that question now.
Yeah. But Dorothy's right. We didn't, before, when I became chair, we created a new committee network. And the whole idea was to be able to outline specific roles and have more board input at a micro level so that when it came to the board, there wasn't hours of discussion and debate on nebulous concepts that no one had really looked at. And that was the whole purpose of it. And it was, physicians were integral in that change. It was very important that we have physician input in those. So I think that's been very successful. And I think it's worked very well. So, Madam Chair, I'm completely supportive of the process and what you've been through to get to this. But I would just say from my perspective that if the physicians feel that participating in governance is important, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, considering what's brought forward, I think it would be a bad idea to remove them off of governance.
All right.
But, I mean, I guess how we accomplish that.
Well, I think that how we will accomplish that is that the governance committee, that, as you have it structured now, is basically looking at compliance, and that is what they will continue to do. That you have governing policies that will always come up to the board that goes through the medical staff and that. So how compliance is operating, I don't see that will be changing. But when we first started, that committee has changed than when we first started out what we were doing.
Yep.
And we have moved from that. So I'm okay with, for governance, that we will leave two doctors, some doctors on that. I don't think it's worth us losing a fight on governance. That if they believe that that's where because the term is governance, and the committee will continue to function as it is. Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think, there's an understanding around the compensation and the sensitivities around that. So that is, to your point, Amanda, we're not going to die on the HR hill, so to speak.
Okay. So with that one change for our bylaws, are there any other discussion on the bylaws?
I just want to ask a clarifying question as it pertains to combining finance and planning. Would, in your mind, that still be a two-chair situation?
Co-chairs.
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 Okay.
That to me is, they have always had to work together. Now, instead of having separate committees, you would have co-chairs doing that. Trent will still do planning and what he has done.
Did you hear that, Trent? He will still be doing that.
Or I didn't hear it.
Wait, if he thought he had got out of a committee. No, and I still, with Medical Horizon, I will be appointing somebody to be co-chair of that so that we will have something done. The committees are not going away. We are just merging them for a reporting mechanism and stuff like that. Believe me, board, you will still have some responsibility. Sure. I have not.
Is one thing that, and I don't want to lose sight of, especially in light of building beautiful new buildings and kind of the future of JPS, is losing track, especially when it comes to planning, on the capital improvement projects that go to keep all the various facilities running and going. Those tend to take a back seat just because they're not as shiny and as fancy as the new stuff. And so that was my only concern with the combining of those two committees.
Right, and just to clarify, so we took all of the functions that were under planning, and they're just there as a joint committee. If that helps, Roger.
Okay.
Nope.
But I do want us to understand that someone will still have to be the board person that I'm asking to co-chair those, because those are critical. Like the Horizon. I'll still be asking somebody to co-chair it. Okay?
Madam Chair, I had a question about live streaming, which I know is not specifically included in the bylaws, and this is just a function of my ignorance of being the new kid on the block. Are we live streaming all of these committees right now?
You want me to answer that?
Yeah, please do.
We are, and it's not required by law. Usually, we would have a mechanism for members of the public to be able to see the meeting if they want to. So part of the thinking is that we do have the opportunity. This one will probably continue to be live streamed. It's not in the bylaws, but we
This
do
one
have
being which one, I'm sorry?
the full board meeting,
course,
sorry. But we do have the opportunity for us to consider if some of those subcommittees or standing committees won't be live streamed going
Are
forward.
they publicly noticed, I assume, and there's opportunity for participation in those?
So they are publicly noticed to the extent that they meet the requirements under the government code to require it to be an open meeting. So if any of those committees end up not meeting all of those requirements, we also have the opportunity to not have those be open meetings under the Act. Nothing changed in the bylaws relevant to that, other than to clarify that we comply with the Open Meetings Act where required.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just how do we proceed with bylaws changes when there's been some changes approved by the board? Do you have to do another red line so we have a specific document we're voting on, or how does that work?
I'm going to clarify what I understand. So we're voting on the document presented, and I will clarify what I understand to be the changes to that document that you have agreed to. Right now, my understanding is that you are going to vote on as presented, except for we will add we will change the membership of the governance committee back to the way it was previously, where there will be 2 physicians on that committee. Unless there's any other comments to the other proposed changes, I just need to confirm that the clarification to section 3.3 and 3.4, which was that will be a majority of the board that votes to send something to the nominating committee as opposed to a simple majority. Once I get that confirmed, then I have the changes that are going to need to be made to what was presented, and then you all can vote.
So do you need a motion on the modification to the nominating,
Yes, would you entertain that?
if somebody wants to state it?
Read them again, and then I'll.
So request for clarifications to sections 3.3 and 3.4, whether or not that would be a simple majority that of the members present at any meeting, or if it would be a majority of the full board. I think the recommendation was made that it would require a majority of the full board. So I will, Madam Chair, will entertain a motion that we make that change.
Second.
All right. All those in favor of that change signify by saying aye. Okay, and the other change is that we were adding was?
Yeah, it's actually a rejection of a proposed change, so governance will remain as is. So with those clarifications and changes, now you can request a motion to approve the bylaws.
Okay, do I have to rejection of the? Right. So that's a motion. Okay. Well, I'm asking for a motion.
So moved.
Okay. All right. So are there any other discussions on that? All those that approve of that rejection of those changes signify by saying aye. And those by nay, those that disoppose by nay. So you got one nay. Okay. All right. Okay. Now that we've approved those changes, am I ready now to approve the bylaws with those modifications? Okay.
Move to approve the bylaws.
All right. Okay. Is there any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the bylaws as we have changed them signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed by nay. Okay, motion passes. Okay. All right, next on the, where am I? Okay, let me go back. We done got the bylaws, and so now we are ready for the approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone wishes to remove from the consent agenda? And DT, I have it noted that C and D you are abstaining from. Any other removals? Okay. There being none, can I get a motion to approve the consent? Okay. Ralph, who was the second? DT, okay. There any other questions or discussion? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by nay. All right. Okay. Now, we are down to report from legal counsel. Do you have any?
I have a report.
Okay. And do we have anything for closed session?
Nothing for.
Nothing for close. Okay. All right. So there being no further business, I will entertain a motion for adjournment. Okay, Roger. All right, then. We are adjourned. Okay.
Make sure that they